early Christian architecture. This is called the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, and it has been variously church and a mosque by rotation through history. Then Roman architecture, which are very massive structures. Then the revival of art, literature in Europe starting, and the reflection of that is the Gothic architecture. Then the Renaissance. Renaissance is a time of revival in the arts, painting, and the birthplace is Florence, and you have the cathedral in Florence here. Then the Baroque and Rococo, which is a decorative period following this. Then followed by the art movement, the famous school of Bauhaus, started by a person called Walter Gropius in Germany. It was a very important movement in history of art and also architecture. And then the modern architecture of steel buildings, which originated in the US, the tall steel buildings. Then high-tech modern architecture about 20 years back, where all the inside of the building is thrown outside. It's like a man with all his inside services, you know, the intestines and all these things projected outside, you know. It has a purpose there in the design. Then the modern expressionism, which is reflected by Calatrava. You will see more about this architect Calatrava. This you will see another color, but this is supposed to visualize like an eye. Half the structures above, this water here, the whole thing looks like an eye. And this deconstructivism is a structure by an architect called Frank Gehry, and this is entirely done with computer using a software called CATIA, C-A-T-I-A, CATIA. This is generally used by architects, the CATIA software. So, and this was possible, and what you see is a titanium sheet over it. This is a museum in Bilbao in Spain, and it is a world acclaimed structure. Next one. So here the same structures we are seeing with a timeline. Here the Egyptian minus 3120, the Egyptian wonder of the pyramid. And what is the biggest challenge in this pyramid is, what's the question on our mind when we see this structure? How they carried these heavy blocks to the peak, right? There are various theories. One theory is that the whole level is surrounded by earth into a sliding ramp over which it was slid and taken up. There is one plausible theory, not only for pyramid, for our 11-tiered temples of Tamil Nadu, right? Even there are no lifting cranes and derricks like in modern times that we have. They are only manual and some animals. So this had to be created. Then the Greek architecture, the Roman in 720, the Gothic architecture, the Renaissance, and look at this arch here. The arch is a wonderful structure. You will be studying arches in your third year, design and analysis and design of arches. But the surprising thing is, the ancient Indian builder did not have an idea of an arch. The consequence of that is, when you go to our Hindu temples, what you will find, columns closed, very spaced, close to each other, because they had a concept of beam, post and lintels. Post and lintel. So if you have a stone beam, the stone cannot withstand much tension, it will break. So you needed the supports very close to each other. Whereas if you construct an arch, you can have larger span. So this was not known to the ancient Indian builder, the arch. So arch came into India through the Mughals and also through Europeans. So in a temple you won't find arches. So then we have the Gothic cathedral, is a masterpiece. We will tell a little more about it. Renaissance. Then the steel structures, we don't see too much of steel structures in India, but if you go to United States, every alternate structure is a steel structure, and they do it very rapidly. And the marking and the milestone in steel structure was set by this Eiffel Tower, which is a world renowned monument. I think all of you will be knowing about it. It's a very popular one. It's done by a Gustav Eiffel, an engineer, and he set a record by creating this landmark structure. Then skyscrapers, Many of them will be knowing. Then the high-tech architecture. Then this is, you are coming into the realm of what is called digital architecture. What do you mean by digital architecture? Using extensive use of computers. In fact, we go to School of Architecture across the road, they have a master's program called MR in digital architecture, where you make extensive use of computers in all your designs, right? Then you have smart structures. Smart structures are structures which have a certain amount of intelligence built into it. Next one. Now what you do is, you come to the, we have talked about architecture and architectural evolution over 5,000 years, but we reduced it to a matter of a few minutes. But those students of architecture study this for one full semester, if not a year, and the book is called Bannister-Fletcher, Bannister-Fletcher, which has gone into 18 editions. It's called The History of Architecture. So those of you are interested, you might find the soft copy in the computer. Most probably it might be have in the computer, or in the library you can get Bannister-Fletcher History of Architecture. It's a massive book. It's like a dictionary. It has gone into 17 or 18 editions. It's a Bible for all architects, right? So here now we are looking at we saw the distinction between architecture and civil engineering. But architect cannot have his forms. He might capture space, but to give the meaning for the space, you need a structure, right? It's like a vessel. A vessel is useful as much for its material part as much as the hollow, empty space inside. A vessel is useful because of its empty space inside. The same thing with architecture. Architecture is useful for the empty space which is captured and given meaning to by the architect. But how the empty space is captured? By structure, various forms of structure. So in structure, you started with how the structure evolved. It also took thousands of years to come to the modern smart structure. So we start with stacking. What is stack? You can create a wall just by stacking stones. Even today if you go to villages, you will find some of the short compound walls made just by stacking broken stones. Yes or right? Yes or no? You would have seen that. That's the most primitive form of constructing a structure. Then we have the post and lintel, which all are 1,000 pillared mandapa in Tamil Nadu and Andhra. You would have seen, all of you would have seen. So that is following the concept of post. Post means columns, and lintel. Lintel means beam. Post and lintel. Now the stone, the ancient material was stone. So the stone, as I said, when you bend like this, there is compression along the top fibers are becoming short. That means in compression. The bottom fibers are becoming longer. That means it's being pulled apart. It means under tension. So when you subject this type of force bending to stones, what happens? It will break here. So what happens? You have to give small spans. Small spans means more columns.